What would you do if the parents who threw you away showed up 15 years later, smiling, with a lawyer, demanding millions from the man who actually raised you? And what if the very document they signed the night they got rid of you was the one thing that would destroy them? My name is Rachel Lawson. I am 28 years old, and last week I watched my mother's face drain of every drop of color in a conference room on the 44th floor of the Prudential Tower in Boston. Attorney Catherine Blake had just read Clause 7 of my Uncle George's will, and my mother, the woman who once told me I was no longer part of her family, shot to her feet with her mouth hanging open and nothing coming out. But before I tell you what happened in that room, I need to take you back to the summer of 2010, when I was a 13-year-old girl in East Baltimore, convinced that everything wrong in my family was somehow my fault. My father, David Lawson, fixed pipes for a living. He was a quiet man, and most of his silence was spent agreeing with whatever my mother decided. My mother, Karen, worked the register at a pharmacy and ran our household like someone who always knew exactly who deserved what. My older sister Megan was 2 years ahead of me. She had our mother's golden hair, bright blue eyes, and easy laugh. Everyone said it. Megan looks just like you, Karen, and my mother would beam. I took after our late grandmother on my father's side. Brown hair, brown eyes, quiet. My mother never said that was a bad thing. She just never said much about me at all. The differences showed up everywhere. For Megan's 15th birthday, my mother threw a party with 15 guests, a 3-tier cake from the bakery on Canton Street, and a rented karaoke machine. For my 13th birthday, it was the 4 of us around the kitchen table with a marked-down cake from the pharmacy. The frosting said happy birthday with no name, a leftover from someone else's canceled order. I once spent an entire afternoon making my mother a hand-drawn Mother's Day card. She glanced at it, said thank you, and slid it into a drawer I never saw her open again. That same year, Megan handed her gas station flowers, and my mother pinned them to the refrigerator for a month. I did not understand what was happening until I was 12, when I discovered Megan had a college savings account open since she was 5. 8 years of deposits, thousands of dollars. I asked my mother why I did not have one. She shrugged. Megan needs that for college. You will figure something out. You have always been good at adapting. That was the first time I understood my place. I was the spare child, kept around but never chosen. In April of 2010, I applied in secret for the Virginia STEM Summer Academy at Virginia Tech, a 6-week program for exceptional students in science and math. Full scholarship, $4,500. Out of 2,200 applicants, 50 were selected. I was one of them. For one afternoon, I felt like I mattered. Then Megan found out about a performing arts camp in California. 3 weeks, no scholarship, $4,100. That night at dinner, my mother announced her decision. Rachel, you are going to turn down that science thing. We cannot afford both, and Megan's camp will look better on college applications. She said it the way someone discusses switching laundry detergent, not like she was crushing her daughter's only proof of worth. The word came out before I could stop it. No. The kitchen went silent. Excuse me, my mother said, her voice dropping to that dangerous register. This scholarship is not yours to redirect, I said, hands trembling but voice steady. I earned this. It is mine. My mother stared at me like I had become a stranger at her own table. If you cannot sacrifice for this family, she said slowly, then you are not part of this family. I saw my father place his hand on the table as if to speak. My mother shot him one look, and he pulled it back without a word. That was the moment I understood my father was not silent by choice. He was silent by design. 3 days later, I came home from the library and found everything I owned in 2 black garbage bags on the front porch. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not angry but resolved, like someone who had finished scrubbing a stubborn stain. I called George, she said. From now on, you are his problem. Behind her, my father stared at the floor. He did not look at me. Upstairs, Megan watched from behind the curtain. When our eyes met, she stepped back into the shadows. She did not come down. Across the fence, our neighbor Mrs. Patterson stood frozen in her yard, mouth open. She said nothing, but quietly set a paper bag beside me later, 2 sandwiches and a bottle of water, then went back inside. The only kindness that night came from a stranger. I sat on that porch for 4 hours. My mother went inside after 5 minutes. The porch light never came on. Around 8, a light rain began to fall. I had no jacket. I hugged my knees and listened to the television bleeding through the door. They were watching their regular shows, laughing at something on screen, while their 13-year-old sat alone in the dark and the rain, wondering what she had done so wrong her own family could not keep her. Uncle George lived in Boston, 3 hours away. He drove through the night. When his gray Honda pulled in just after 10, I was still on those garbage bags, soaked and shaking. He got out, walked straight to me, and wrapped me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "From now on," he said quietly, "you have a home." That night, as we drove north through the darkness, I did not know my mother had signed a document inside that house before we left. I did not know what it said. I was just a scared kid staring out a rain-streaked window. It would take 15 years for that paper to resurface. And when it did, it would change absolutely everything. The mother who threw me out had also signed me away. Legally, permanently, in black ink on white paper. But that discovery was still 15 years away, waiting for me on the 44th floor, right in front of the very woman who had put her signature on the line. Uncle George's house sat on a quiet street in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston. It was not a large home by any measure, but the first time I walked through the front door carrying nothing but 2 garbage bags of damp clothing, it felt like the biggest place I had ever seen. For the first time in 13 years, I had a bedroom that was entirely mine, a door I could close, a space where no one was going to remind me, in 100 small ways, that I did not quite belong. More than the room, more than the house, what changed everything was that for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw potential instead of a problem. Uncle George had built Lawson Commercial Group from nothing. He started with a single small office building he purchased after working double shifts for 6 straight years. By the time I showed up on his doorstep in 2010, he owned 9 commercial properties across the Boston metro area. He had never married, never had children. But when a 13-year-old girl arrived at his door with nothing but 2 trash bags and a heart full of questions she could not answer, he did not just take her in. He invested in her. During my first week in Boston, Uncle George drove me to a bookstore to pick up school supplies. He walked me down the aisle, gestured at the shelves, and said, "Pick whatever you want." I stood there frozen in the middle of that store, staring at the rows of notebooks and binders, because I genuinely did not know how to respond. No one had ever told me to choose before. In my old house, things were chosen for me, or more accurately, chosen for Megan, and I got whatever was left over. Uncle George watched me standing there, and something shifted in his expression. He did not say anything. He just put his hand gently on my shoulder and waited until I was ready. Over the next 4 years, I poured everything I had into my education. I graduated from Beacon Hill Academy in 2014 as class valedictorian, president of the math club, with a 4.0 unweighted GPA. Boston University offered me admission with a partial scholarship to the Questrom School of Business. By 2018, I had earned my bachelor's degree in finance, graduating summa cum laude with a 3.95 GPA. Starting in my sophomore year, Uncle George gave me internship opportunities at Lawson Commercial Group. I learned the business from the ground up: data entry, lease analysis, tenant relations, property assessments. Every task he handed me was a lesson wrapped in trust. In 2019, after 18 months at a major accounting firm I will call Crawford & Associates, I earned my CPA certification. 1 year later, Uncle George offered me the position of controller. By 2021, I was chief financial officer. On my 26th birthday, I was managing a portfolio of 14 commercial properties with a combined value of $25.2 million. That morning, Uncle George sent me an email. I still have it saved. The subject line read, "To my daughter." The message was simple. You do not need to prove anything to the people who abandoned you, but you do need to prove to yourself that you are worthy. You have. Happy birthday, Rachel. I read that email 4 times and cried at my desk with the door closed. In 15 years, my biological family reached out exactly 3 times. The first was in 2012. My mother called Uncle George's phone, not mine, to ask for $5,000. My father had lost his job. Times were hard. Surely George could help his own brother. Uncle George declined. He told me about the call afterward, and I had never seen his jaw so tight. "They did not ask about you once," he said. "Do you know what the very first thing your mother asked me was?" She said, "You still have that building in Quincy, right?" Not, "How is Rachel doing in school?" Not, "Is she okay?" She asked about real estate. The second contact came in 2016. Megan mailed me a wedding invitation. No personal note. "No, I hope you are well." "No, I have been thinking about you." Just the formal printed card with my name and Uncle George's Boston address. I did not attend. I did not send a gift. I did not respond at all. The third was in 2020. My mother sent me an email with the subject line "checking in." The body of the message mentioned that she had seen an article in the Boston Business Journal about Lawson Commercial Group expanding into new markets. She said she hoped I was doing well and suggested we should catch up sometime. I deleted the email without responding. I was not holding grudges. I had simply built a life that did not include them, and I saw no reason to change that. In the summer of 2024, Uncle George received a diagnosis that shattered my world. Congestive heart failure, advanced stage. The doctors told him he had 12 to 18 months. He lasted 8. During those final months, Uncle George met with his estate attorney several times. He updated his will in June of 2024, 6 months before he passed. When I asked him about it, he just smiled the way he always did, when he knew something I did not. "Everything is taken care of," he said. "You focus on the business. I have handled the rest." I did not know what he had written. I did not know about the clauses, or the sealed envelopes, or the letters tucked inside. I trusted him completely. One night near the end, I was sitting beside his hospital bed at Mass General, holding his hand while the monitors beeped softly in the dark. His grip tightened around my fingers, and he turned his head slowly to look at me. "When they come," he whispered. "And they will come. Do not be afraid. I have already prepared everything." I did not understand what he meant. I thought the medication was making him confused. I squeezed his hand and told him to rest. It was not until much later that I realized he had not been confused at all. He had been warning me. Uncle George passed away on February 28, 2025. He went peacefully in his sleep with me holding his hand. The monitors flatlined at 3:17 in the morning, and I sat there in the silence for a long time, not crying yet, just holding on to the hand of the only person who had ever chosen me. Uncle George was right. They came. Exactly 7 days after he closed his eyes for the last time, my phone buzzed with an unknown number from Baltimore. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up, and the voice on the other end of the line was one I had not heard in 15 years but recognized instantly. It was my mother. "Rachel," she said, and even after 15 years, she still pronounced my name the same way, like she was tasting something she was not sure she wanted to swallow. I did not call her Mom. I said Karen, just her name, and there was a pause so long I could almost hear her recalculating. She said she had heard about George, said she was sorry, mentioned coming up to pay her respects, and then without missing a beat, asked about the will reading. "Family has a right to attend these things," she said, "especially when it involves a brother's estate." "The memorial was 3 days ago," I told her. Another pause. "Well, I heard there is a reading scheduled soon. I wanted to be there. For family reasons." There it was. The real reason, delivered in under 2 minutes. She had not called to grieve. She had called to collect. Catherine Blake, Uncle George's estate attorney, confirmed everything the next morning. My mother had hired an attorney named Marcus Caldwell, a name I recognized because Uncle George had once consulted him and decided not to work with him. Caldwell had filed a formal challenge alleging undue influence, claiming I had isolated George during his illness and pressured him to change his estate plan. They were demanding 50%, arguing that David, as George's only surviving sibling, was entitled to inherit. In the filing, my mother had written that I abandoned my family at 13 and exploited George's loneliness. I read that line twice. The woman who packed my life into garbage bags was claiming I was the one who left. My hands shook so badly I had to set the document down. Catherine laid out the situation in her office on the 44th floor. If this goes to litigation, she said, the estate could be frozen for 12 to 18 months. Properties need management, tenants need attention. A legal battle could cost hundreds of thousands and devalue the portfolio. So they are betting I will pay them off, I said. That is the strategy, Catherine agreed. Do you have any documentation about 2010? She asked. I was 13, I said. I did not keep records. George did, she replied, already reaching for her phone. 20 minutes later, her assistant returned with a yellowed folder. Catherine opened it, scanned the contents, and looked at me with an expression I could not read. Rachel, did you know about this? She slid the document across the desk. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights and transfer of guardianship, dated July 15, 2010. David and Karen Lawson had voluntarily given up all parental rights and transferred full guardianship to George Raymond Lawson. 4 signatures at the bottom. My mother's, my father's, Uncle George's, and a notary from Suffolk County. I stared at my mother's signature. The handwriting was clear, steady, perfectly formed. Not a single tremor. She signed her daughter away, with a hand that did not even shake. I was sitting on the porch in the rain when she signed this, I said quietly. They did not just remove you from their home, Catherine said. They gave you up legally. As far as the law is concerned, they stopped being your parents the moment they signed. David had no standing to claim inheritance through family relationship. He was not my father anymore. He had severed that connection himself, in writing 15 years ago. Catherine offered 2 paths. Option 1, negotiate. Offer $500,000 to $1 million for them to withdraw and sign a waiver. Faster, cleaner. Option 2, proceed with the will reading as scheduled. Let them attend. Present the evidence, the guardianship document, the full history, everything George wanted disclosed. George anticipated this. Rachel, she said. He left specific instructions for exactly this scenario. He wanted the truth on the record. That night, I sat in Uncle George's living room, staring at the photographs on the mantel. Me at every stage. Graduation, commencement, CPA license, first day as CFO. In every photo, Uncle George was beaming beside me. No photographs of David or Karen. Not one. I called Catherine at 7 the next morning. No settlement, no buyout. If they want to be present, let them. We are not hiding anything. They chose to make this public when they filed their challenge. I am just respecting their choice. The will reading was set for Friday, March 14th, at 2 in the afternoon. My best friend Sophie Nguyen helped me organize the documentation. 52 emails from George over 10 years. They painted a clear picture. In 2002, David had borrowed $85,000 from George with a promise to repay within 5 years. 23 years later, not a dollar returned. Their estrangement had been festering for 8 years before I ever entered the picture. Sophie also pulled my financial reports as CFO. The portfolio had grown from $18.5 million to $25.2 million, a 36% increase. Occupancy at 97%. Tenant satisfaction at an all-time high. Thursday evening, I met with Dr. Amanda Price, my therapist. You are not seeking revenge, she said. You are closing a chapter. What if I feel satisfaction when they realize they have lost? I asked. That is called justice, she said. Feeling validated when the truth comes out is not cruelty. The question is what you do afterward. That night, in the bottom drawer of Uncle George's desk, I found a photograph I had never seen. Me at 13, the day I arrived in Boston. Swollen eyes, tangled hair, 2 garbage bags at my feet. On the back, in his handwriting, 7 words. The day I got my daughter. I pressed it against my chest and cried in a way I had not cried in years. Friday morning, I looked in the bathroom mirror and spoke out loud. She has no power over you anymore. Only you get to decide your story now. I put on a navy suit, pulled my hair back, and walked out the door. The woman in that mirror was not the girl who sat on garbage bags in the rain. Today I was walking into that room to reclaim the truth. and Karen had no idea what was waiting for her. The conference room occupied a corner of the 44th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Boston Harbor. On March 14th, the sky was overcast, and the water below was a flat steel gray. I arrived at 1:45, 15 minutes early. Navy suit, hair pulled back, folder of documents arranged in front of me. 16 people were already present. Catherine Blake at the head of the table with 2 associates. Robert Chen, the senior auditor. Representatives from 3 charities, Boston Children's Hospital, Habitat for Humanity New England, and the Blue Hills Reservation Foundation. 5 senior staff from Lawson Commercial Group, who had known me since my intern days. At 2:03, the elevator doors opened. Karen stepped out first. Black dress, pearl necklace, full makeup, an expression of dignified grief so carefully composed it might as well have been rehearsed. Behind her came David, in a gray suit that no longer fit. Megan followed in a pastel pink dress, an odd choice for a will reading. Marcus Caldwell brought up the rear with his Mont Blanc briefcase. Karen entered the room the way she entered every room, like she owned it. Catherine directed them to seats along the wall. The main table was reserved for beneficiaries. Karen's jaw tightened. She had expected the center. Instead, she was pushed to the margins. On her way to the wall, Karen detoured past Dr. Linda Foster from the hospital. "I am Karen Lawson," she said, loud enough for the room. "George's sister-in-law. We were quite close before this unfortunate estrangement." She glanced at me. It is tragic when someone comes into a family and creates division. George was so trusting, perhaps too trusting. I kept my eyes on my folder. Karen fed on reactions. I gave her nothing. As she passed my chair, she leaned down and whispered something only I could hear. "You think you have already won. Just wait." My heart slammed against my ribs, but my face stayed still. Karen took her seat but was not finished. "A child who gets rejected by her own parents usually has a reason," she said to the room. "A mother always knows." Several people shifted uncomfortably. Robert Chen stared at her with open disbelief. Catherine cleared her throat. "It is 2:10. We will begin." She broke the seal on a large envelope. "This is the last will and testament of George Raymond Lawson, born July 4, 1953. Deceased, February 28, 2025. Executed, June 18, 2024. Article 2 noted a psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Stephen Park 8 days before signing, confirming full testamentary capacity and no undue influence. I caught Karen glancing at Caldwell. They had been banking on challenging George's mental state. That documentation dismantled their strategy before the reading truly began. Article 4 listed the assets. 14 commercial properties valued at $19.5 million. Investment accounts at $4.3 million. Cash at $1.5 million. Megan whispered to Karen, "That is almost $25 million. Karen nodded, eyes calculating. Then Catherine read Article 5, and Karen's smile died. "I make no provision in this will for my brother David James Lawson, for the following reasons. First, in 2002, David borrowed $85,000 with a promise to repay within 5 years. 23 years have passed. Not $1 returned. David went pale. Second, on July 15, 2010, David and Karen voluntarily executed a document relinquishing all parental rights to their daughter Rachel Marie Lawson, transferring full guardianship to me." Karen shot to her feet. "What does that have to do with anything?" Catherine looked at her over her glasses, then continued reading without pause. "By legally terminating their parental relationship with Rachel, David and Karen severed any claim to inherit from me through her. Rachel is my legal heir. David is not her legal father. Therefore, David has no standing to challenge this will on grounds of family connection." David stood up, voice cracking. "I am George's brother. His blood brother." Caldwell pulled him down, but even the attorney's face had gone gray. Catherine produced the certified copy, file number 2010, GH5847, and laid it on the table. Karen stared at it like a live grenade. Then she lost control. She pointed at me, finger shaking. "She did this. She manipulated George against his own family." Catherine remained level. "Mrs. Lawson, Take your seat. Disrupting the reading is a matter the court takes seriously. I spoke then, calm and steady, the way Uncle George taught me. Karen, you made a choice 15 years ago. You packed my things into garbage bags and left me on a porch in the dark. Then you went inside and signed a document giving me away. I was 13. The room was silent. That was your decision, not mine. Not Uncle George's, yours. Everything happening today is the consequence of what you chose that night. I do not hate you, but I do not owe you anything. You made sure of that when you signed that paper. David stood up suddenly, face red, mouth working. Rachel, Dad, he started, then stopped. Karen whipped around. Sit down, David. And he sat. Immediately. The same way he had been sitting down for 15 years. The entire room watched it happen, and everyone understood exactly how this family worked. Catherine spoke. I have not yet read Article 7. Article 7, Designation of Sole Beneficiary. I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate to my legally adopted daughter, Rachel Marie Lawson. Adopted. The word hung like a thunderclap. Karen went white. George formally adopted Rachel on September 12, 2012, Catherine confirmed. As parental rights had already been relinquished, no additional consent was required. Megan stared at me. So you are not even related to us anymore? Not legally, I said. Not since Mom and Dad signed me away. Catherine read George's words. Rachel is my daughter in every way that matters. There is no one more deserving, and no one I love more. Tears slid down my cheeks. Karen whispered to Caldwell. Tell them this cannot be legal. Caldwell did not answer. Catherine then read Uncle George's personal letter. Rachel, if this letter is being read aloud, it means things happened exactly as I expected. Your biological family showed up looking for money they never earned, from a man they never cared about. You came to me as a wounded child, thrown away by people who should have protected you. But you did not let that define you. I did not save you, Rachel. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it. Do not let them make you feel guilty for surviving them. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. Forever your father, George. Karen made one last play, her voice shifting to wounded motherhood. Rachel, sweetheart, we are still blood. Can we at least talk about dividing the estate fairly? You gave up the right to call me sweetheart 15 years ago, I said. Karen turned desperate. Marcus, tell them we have grounds. Undue influence. Catherine turned her iPad around and read an email from George to Caldwell, dated 2022, terminating services because Caldwell had advocated for David's interests over George's wishes. You previously represented George, Catherine said. You were terminated for that reason, and now you accepted this case without disclosing the conflict of interest. Karen turned on Caldwell, voice hissing. You told me we would win. You promised me. Caldwell gathered his briefcase with shaking hands and walked out without a word. The door clicked shut. Karen stood frozen, abandoned by her own attorney in front of everyone. David sat slumped, staring at the floor. Megan cried quietly. Karen turned to me one last time, the mask gone. We are still family, aren't we? Blood is blood. I stood. Karen, you stopped being my family on July 15, 2010. You signed the document yourself. I do not hate you. I feel sorry for you. But you have no claim on me. Not legally. Not emotionally. Not in any way that matters. David passed me on his way out and stopped for half a second. He did not look at me. I am sorry, he whispered. Then kept walking. 2 words. 15 years too late. But I heard them. Catherine read the charitable bequests. $550,000 to Boston Children's Hospital. $350,000 to Habitat for Humanity, $250,000 to the Blue Hills Foundation. George also requested that I continue his charitable programs. I will, I said. I will honor everything he built. I realized the charity representatives were not here by legal requirement. George had invited them as neutral witnesses, anticipating every move. Dr. Foster smiled at me. George talked about you constantly. He said taking you in was the best decision he ever made. She pressed her card into my hand. When you are ready for that scholarship fund, call me. I stood to speak. He took me in at 13 with nothing and gave me a home, an education, and a family that chose to love me. I will continue everything he built and establish the Lawson STEM Scholarship for children from difficult family situations. I looked at Karen. I hold no grudge, but peace does not mean pretending it did not happen. George taught me that family is about choice. The people who show up when everything falls apart, those are your family. Robert Chen began to clap. Others followed. Karen did not move. The reading concluded at 3:52. Karen stood slowly, like a woman who had aged 10 years in 2 hours. David shuffled out. Megan followed without a word. Karen lingered, looked at me one final time. Her lips formed what might have been, "I am sorry." Then she closed her mouth and walked out. I felt something complicated, the strange emptiness when a chapter finally closes. Sophie squeezed my arm. "You did it." George would be so proud. I sat alone for a long time, staring at his photograph. I thought it was over, but I was wrong. 3 weeks later, an email appeared. And 2 months after that, a handwritten letter arrived from Baltimore. In handwriting I recognized immediately. It did not come from Karen. 1 week after the will reading, Catherine Blake filed a formal complaint with the Massachusetts State Bar Association against Marcus Caldwell. I did not ask her to. She did it because it was her professional obligation. When an attorney witnesses another attorney violating the rules of professional conduct, reporting is not optional. The complaint outlined 3 violations: conflict of interest for having previously represented George and possessing confidential knowledge of his estate planning, failure to disclose that prior relationship to Karen and David, and misrepresentation for leading his clients to believe they had a strong case when he knew their legal position was fundamentally compromised. 2 months later, in late May of 2025, the Bar Association issued its ruling. Marcus Caldwell was suspended from practicing law for 8 months, fined $18,000, and required to complete additional ethics training. Within weeks, 4 of his largest clients transferred their business elsewhere. His firm's revenue dropped by roughly $220,000 that year. Sophie asked me once if I felt satisfied by his downfall. I did not do anything to him, I told her. He did this to himself. I just happened to be standing there when the consequences caught up. Some people build their own prison without any help at all. 3 weeks after the will reading, an email appeared in my inbox from an address I did not recognize. The subject line read, "Please read." It was from Karen. The message was longer than I expected. Karen had never been one for writing. She preferred phone calls, where she could control the tone, interrupt, and redirect. In the email, she acknowledged making mistakes when I was young, but never named what those mistakes were. She blamed circumstances, financial struggles, being overwhelmed. She said she was not asking for money, then pivoted to suggesting we work things out. And she still called herself my mother. "I am your mom," she wrote. "Nothing changes that." I read the email 3 times, then called Dr. Amanda Price and read it to her over the phone. "What do you notice about it?" Dr. Price asked. I thought about it carefully. She acknowledges mistakes but keeps them vague. She never once writes, "I threw you out," or "I signed away my parental rights." She blames things that happened to her, rather than things she did. She says she is not asking for money, but then steers toward resolving things. And she still claims the title of mother, even though she legally surrendered it. I spent 2 days writing my response. It was 4 sentences long. "Karen, I have read your email. I forgave you a long time ago, for myself, not for you, but I do not want a relationship with you. Please do not contact me again." She did not reply. I felt no guilt, only clarity. 2 months after the will reading, a letter arrived at my Boston address. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on plain paper, tucked into a slightly wrinkled envelope with a Baltimore postmark. The return address listed M. Carter. Megan had taken her former husband's last name. I opened it reluctantly, bracing for another round of manipulation. What I found inside was something entirely different. "Rachel," the letter began, "I am not writing this to ask for anything. I do not want money. I do not want forgiveness. I just need to say something I should have said 15 years ago. The night Mom and Dad kicked you out, I was watching from my bedroom window. I saw you sitting on the porch with those garbage bags. I watched for 4 hours. I saw you alone in the dark, waiting, and I never came down. I could have. I was 15. I could have brought you a glass of water, or sat with you, or at least told you I was sorry. Instead, I just watched from behind the glass like a coward. That has haunted me ever since. Every time Mom would talk about you, always blaming you, always making herself the victim, I would think about that window and about what I did not do. Then Megan wrote something that stopped me cold. One day Lily asked me, "Mommy, do you have a sister?" I said yes. She asked, "How come I have never met my aunt?" I did not know what to say. That was the moment I realized my children deserve the truth more than they deserve comfortable lies. I am not asking you to forgive me, the letter continued. I am not asking for a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I failed you when you needed family most. You deserved better from your older sister. I read that letter 4 times. It was the first honest thing anyone in my biological family had ever said to me. No excuses, no deflection, no hidden requests for money, just accountability. I did not write back immediately. I needed time to understand what, if anything, I wanted to do with this unexpected door that had cracked open. But for the first time in 15 years, I felt something other than distance when I thought about my sister. 4 months after the will reading, I finally wrote back. Dr. Price had helped me sort through what I actually wanted, not what I felt obligated to do, not what would look generous, but what I genuinely wanted for myself. The answer surprised me. I did not want to shut Megan out completely. Her letter had been the first real acknowledgement of what happened that night, and it had come without strings. But I was not ready to trust her either. 15 years does not disappear because of one letter, no matter how honest it is. So I wrote back with conditions. Megan, I have read your letter many times. I appreciate that you acknowledged what happened without making excuses. That took courage. I am not ready for a full relationship, but I am open to cautious contact under 3 conditions. First, no contact through Mom or Dad. I have ended communication with them permanently, and I need that boundary respected. Second, no discussions about money, inheritance, or anything related to Uncle George's estate. Ever. Third, I reserve the right to end any conversation without explanation. If I go quiet, I need you to respect that. If these conditions work for you, we can start with a monthly video call. 15 minutes, low pressure. If that goes well, we build from there. This is not me saying everything is forgiven and forgotten. This is me saying I am willing to see if there is something worth building, but it has to be on my terms. Megan replied 3 days later. One word. Accepted. I scheduled our first call for the following Saturday. 15 minutes. That was all I could commit to, but it was a start. The first video call happened on a Saturday afternoon in September of 2025, 6 months after the will reading. I sat in my home office with the laptop open, watching the seconds tick down to 2 o'clock. My heart was beating faster than it had during the will reading, and that realization startled me. Confronting Karen had been about defending myself against an attack. This was about choosing to be vulnerable, and that felt far more dangerous. The call connected. Megan's face filled the screen. She looked different from the will reading. Less makeup, more tired, but also somehow more real. 15 years compressed into a small rectangle of light. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. We looked at each other for a moment. "I was not sure you would actually pick up," she admitted. "I almost did not," I said. That broke something loose. Megan laughed, a nervous, relieved sound, and I found myself almost smiling. We kept it light, the way I had asked. Surface level. She told me about her work, training to become a nail technician, almost finished with her certification. She mentioned her kids, Jaden, who was 8, and Lily, who was 6, without once asking me to be their aunt. I told her about the business, about the weather in Boston, about nothing too personal. Halfway through the call, Lily ran across the background of the screen, spotted the camera, and waved with the kind of unfiltered joy only a 6-year-old can produce. "Hi, Auntie," she called out, and Megan scrambled to pull her away, apologizing in a flustered rush. "It is fine," I said, and I realized that was the first time anyone had ever called me aunt. One small word, but it opened something inside me I did not even know was closed. At the 14-minute mark, I said we should wrap up. Megan paused. Rachel, she said, thank you for giving me a chance. I know you did not have to. This is step one, I said. We will see where it goes. Step one is more than I expected, she said. We scheduled another call for the following month. After she hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, processing. I did not know if Megan and I would ever have a real relationship. Maybe we would stay in this cautious place forever, circling each other from a safe distance. But for the first time in 15 years, I was the one deciding what happened next, and that power, the power to choose, was worth more than any inheritance. 1 year to the day after the will reading, on March 14, 2026, I stood outside a modest commercial building on Capitol Hill in Boston. It was the first property Uncle George ever purchased, back in 1987, when he was a 34-year-old man with a big dream and barely enough money for a down payment. The building had been renovated the previous fall, new windows, upgraded systems, fresh landscaping. But I was there that morning for something else. A bronze plaque had been mounted beside the main entrance, the George R. Lawson Building, in memory of a man who chose love over blood. 1953 to 2025. I touched the letters of his name and felt the cold metal under my fingertips. In the year since the will reading, Lawson Commercial Group had grown by 12%, bringing the portfolio to $28.1 million. Occupancy remained above 95%. We had expanded into 2 new properties and upgraded 3 existing ones. More importantly, the Lawson STEM Scholarship had awarded its first grants. 6 students from difficult family situations, each receiving full funding for summer programs in science and mathematics. Dr. Linda Foster at Boston Children's Hospital had helped select the recipients. Megan and I still talked once a month. The conversations had gotten easier. We had graduated from 15 minutes to 25. I had seen pictures of her kids. She had seen pictures of my apartment. We were not sisters in any traditional sense, but we were something still forming, still fragile but real. Karen and David had stopped trying to contact me. I did not know what their lives looked like now, and I found that I did not need to know. Sophie walked up beside me and looked at the plaque. You okay? She asked. I considered the question carefully. I am peaceful, I said. That is even better than happy. Uncle George taught me that family is a choice, and I had finally learned to choose myself. The sky over Boston was clear for the first time in weeks. I could see all the way to the hills. If I look at my own story through a psychological lens, there is a concept called conditional self-worth, the belief that you are only valuable if certain people approve of you. I spent the first 13 years of my life trapped in that belief. My mother's indifference felt like proof that I did not matter. What actually saved me was not Uncle George's money. It was his unconditional acceptance. He saw me for who I was, not for who I should have been. Here is what I want you to take from this story. You do not need anyone's permission to know your worth. You have every right to set boundaries, even with family, even with parents, even with blood. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself. Reconciliation is something you choose for yourself. Those are 2 different things, and no one gets to decide which one you offer. Your story is yours to write. Thank you for staying with me through all of this. If it resonated with you, if you have ever had to find your own worth after someone tried to take it away, I hope you know you are not alone. Until next time, take care of yourself, because you are worth it. You always were.